This baby can understand his parents' conversations right after birth. He can tell when his mother is changing his wet diaper, and he secretly watches his father fight monsters every day to learn combat techniques. His name is Arthur, and he starts escaping from his crib when he's only a few months old. He knows how to avoid his busy mother when she's doing housework and sneaks over to the bookshelf to read magic books that are bigger than he is. Most people awaken their magic talent around the age of 20. Arthur, who cannot yet speak or walk, somehow learns magic at an incredible speed and accidentally blows up his own house. By the time his parents find him, Arthur is already floating in the air using magic. This is only the beginning. In his very first battle, Arthur breaks his father's weapon, displaying power far beyond his age. His parents, both adventurers, are utterly shocked. By the time Arthur turns 4, he can already match strength with fighters and race against assassins. Even when surrounded by hundreds of enemies, Arthur manages to take down the mage to die with him in a desperate life or death situation. To uncover the secret behind this extraordinary child, we have to look back at his life before he was reincarnated. Arthur once lived in a world without magic, where only advanced technology existed. Born as an orphan at the very bottom of society, Arthur relied on his strength and intelligence to rise through endless battles. With blood-stained hands and an iron will, he ultimately reached the pinnacle of power and became the strongest king in his world. Arthur's later years were filled with suffering. He lived each day on edge, constantly guarding against assassination attempts from his enemies. In many ways, death felt more like a release than a tragedy. After death, Arthur was reincarnated into a completely different world. Now in the body of a newborn baby, he initially thought he was dreaming. That changed when something else captured his attention. Both of his parents were able to use magic, a mysterious power that is completely absent in his previous life. In this new world, monsters and adventurers roam freely. Some of the strongest fighters possess power that rivals that of fighter jets. Arthur feels a long-lost sense of joy stirring within him. It is a mix of excitement for the unknown and the warmth of family. In his previous life, Arthur was trapped in a cycle of bloodshed and betrayal with no one he could truly trust. Now everything is different. He has a father named Reynolds and a mother named Alice who love him deeply and unconditionally. Arthur cherishes this brand new life. While other babies are busy wetting their diapers, he works hard to control his bladder and uses every moment to read and learn about the new world. The continent is home to 3 main races: humans, elves, and dwarves. They rely on the power of magic and progress slowly, with no existence of technological weapons. The professions of magic mainly falls into 2 categories. One is sorcerers like Alice, who summon various elements for offense and support. The other is warriors like Reynolds, who use magic to enhance their bodies for combat. As the strongest king in his previous life, Arthur possesses an extensive reserve of knowledge. Supernatural powers also existed in his former world, though they are much weaker than magic. Arthur works hard to organize the knowledge from both worlds, seizing every opportunity to gather information about warriors and sorcerers. Whenever this happens, his parents always interrupt his studies. They prefer that Arthur grow up more slowly and spend more time with them. In his previous life, Arthur grew up in an orphanage, where family love feels like a luxury. It seems God sensed his longing for affection and granted him the greatest compensation in this life. Surrounded by his parents' love and care, Arthur gradually grows up. The former strongest king has now become a child who knows how to act spoiled. By sulking, Arthur earns the chance to read magic books, awakening the magic within his body more than 10 years earlier than ordinary people. Reynolds and Alice look at the accidentally destroyed house and their child floating in midair. Their first reaction isn't shock or pride, but relief that Arthur is safe. Alice's tears fall onto Arthur's face, and in that moment, Arthur begins to cry uncontrollably as well. He can resist all kinds of emotions, except the warmth of family. However, Arthur doesn't slow down his progress despite being surrounded by love. In his previous life, he witnessed too many weak people being killed without reason. Arthur understands that having loved ones means he must become even stronger to protect them. Reynolds is shocked to discover that Arthur, at only 4 years old, is already terrifyingly strong. During their first training session, Arthur breaks Reynolds' weapon with a single strike. This good news, however, causes a disagreement between Reynolds and Alice. Reynolds wants to send Arthur to train under a powerful mentor, hoping to secure a brighter future for their son. Alice, worried that Arthur is too young to take care of himself, firmly refuses to be separated from him. Sensing the tension at home, Arthur suggests that his parents travel with him. Jasmine, Reynolds and Alice can't bear to part with Arthur, so they immediately accept his suggestion. The couple contacts their former adventurer companions and asks them to escort the whole family to a distant city. The team has a well-balanced composition, covering nearly every profession. All the adventurers warmly welcome Arthur except for one, the silent assassin. Jasmine, The journey that follows allows Arthur to see a much wider world. In his previous life, he always traveled by high-speed airships. Now, although the carriage moves much more slowly, it gives Arthur the chance to enjoy the scenery along the way. It turns out that Reynolds and Alice's caution is very necessary. On the first day of their journey, they are attacked by monsters. Fortunately, the adventurer team works together with great coordination, and the monsters are not very strong. After just 3 rounds of combat, the low-level monsters are all defeated and become dinner for the group. This journey also teaches Arthur something important. Alice is a healer, which is extremely rare in this world. She must not reveal her abilities in front of strangers easily, or she might be taken by powerful organizations. The reason she hides away in the countryside is to avoid getting involved in these conflicts. After dinner, Adam, the warrior in the group, invites Arthur to a fighting practice, except for Reynolds and Alice. Everyone is shocked by Arthur's talent for combat. Jasmine in particular is drawn to some of Arthur's fighting techniques. She begins to follow him around, wanting to study him more closely. From that day on, Arthur begins receiving guidance from the older members of the group. From swordsmanship to battlefield movement, his skills start improving in every aspect. On his birthday, Jasmine gives him a short dagger as a gift. A cord is tied to the handle, allowing Arthur to attach one end to himself and throw the dagger for long-range attacks. No one could have imagined that just a few hours later, Arthur would fight with all his might and this new weapon. Just as they are about to set off again, Arthur notices that Alice wants to vomit. He recalls how his mother hasn't had much of an appetite during the journey, and Arthur can't help but feel a bit worried. Soon something far more worrying happens. They are surrounded by a group of bandits who only want the women and children and plan to kill all the men. In terms of individual combat ability, Arthur's group is actually stronger. Unfortunately, the sheer number of enemies is overwhelming, as if no matter how many they defeat, more enemies just keep coming. The main group faces a deadly problem. The continuous fighting drains their stamina rapidly, and there is no way they can last long enough to defeat all the bandits. To make matters worse, the bandit leader joins the battle at this critical moment. Reynolds refuses help from Arthur and Alice. What he says next shocks Arthur deeply. Alice is pregnant, and Arthur has the responsibility to take her and the baby in her belly to escape. Only then does Arthur finally understand why Alice has constantly felt like vomiting during the journey. Reynolds leaves the chance of survival to the 3 people he loves most, throwing himself fully into holding off the bandit leader. Jasmine and the others also help take down part of the bandit group. Arthur does not waste any time. He grabs Alice's hand and tries to escape. At that moment, a mage among the bandits launches a sneak attack. Arthur pushes Alice out of harm's way and falls off the cliff himself. In his final moment, Arthur throws the short dagger Jasmine gave him. Using the rope tied to the handle, he entangles the mage and drags him down the cliff together. In that moment, Arthur's world seems to go completely silent. He can no longer hear his mother's cries, and tears begin to fall from the corners of his eyes. He does not fear death, but his only regret is parting with the parents who love him so deeply. He longs to hold on to this hard-won happiness, and he still wants to introduce himself to the child who has not yet been born. When Arthur regains consciousness, he has no idea why he is inside a mysterious cave. In front of him stands a giant creature. Arthur tries to attack, but she effortlessly knocks him aside. Fortunately, the giant creature does not seem hostile. She brings him a large pile of fruit and insists that he eat his fill before asking her any questions. As Arthur eats, he begins asking questions and learns that the giant creature is named Sylvia. She brings him good news that Arthur's parents have safely escaped. Overwhelmed with emotion, Arthur begins to cry once again and sincerely thanks Sylvia from the bottom of his heart. Sylvia tells Arthur that she cannot leave the cave and can only use magic to observe the outside world. The area nearby is filled with monsters and bandits, so she needs some time to prepare a teleportation spell for Arthur. Besides this, she does not say anything else, and her identity remains a complete mystery. Sylvia shows Arthur a powerful ability. She is able to cast magic while gathering mana at the same time. This means her ability will be greatly enhanced if she fights continuously. Arthur immediately says he wants to learn it so he can use it to kill all his enemies. Sylvia flicks Arthur away without hesitation. She is not satisfied with his answer. Under Sylvia's guidance, Arthur gradually gains a new understanding. In his previous life, although he was a king, the actual operation of the country was managed by the council. Arthur was more like a general, responsible for military campaigns. Later, he grew tired of everything and chose to abdicate. Now Arthur understands why he fights. Power should be a tool used to protect the ones he loves when necessary, not a weapon for venting anger and hatred. Sylvia appreciates Arthur's insight and begins guiding him as her disciple. Meanwhile, a giant creature that looks very similar to Sylvia has just slain a dragon. Sensing the enemy's approach, Sylvia immediately hides Arthur behind a pile of rocks and warns him to stay silent. Soon, the giant creature bursts into the cave and launches an attack. Sylvia releases her seal and begins fighting with her full power in her dragon form. Unfortunately, the enemy proves to be even stronger and soon discovers Arthur's presence. Sylvia activates her most powerful ability, Time Stop. She hands Arthur a dragon egg and a feather, then marks his arm with a strange tattoo. In the final moments of her life, Sylvia unexpectedly calls out Arthur's name from his previous life. She hopes that this man, given a second chance, will no longer be ruled by negative emotions or live a life shrouded in darkness. Arthur has many questions he wants to ask, but unfortunately, Sylvia has no time left. Arthur must leave now. Not everyone is as kind as Sylvia. When her time stop spell ends, the enemy launches a fierce assault. Using the last of her strength, Sylvia detonates the entire cave. At this moment, Arthur's face is covered in tears as he is teleported away. Suddenly, he hears a girl scream and is forced to turn his sorrow into vigilance. He immediately casts magic on his ankles and leaps onto a high tree branch. Arthur quickly locates the source of the scream and finds a group of slave traders has captured an elf girl. Having been separated from his parents during a bandit attack, Arthur knows that if he were caught too, he would end up a slave just like the girl. But he doesn't let fear or anger take over. Instead, he remembers Sylvia's teachings, forcing himself to stay calm. Arthur quietly follows the slave traders, waiting for the right moment to rescue her. Night falls. Arthur deliberately throws a stone to strike the slave trader's mount, luring one of them to investigate alone. In almost an instant, Arthur swiftly kills two men. The third manages to dodge a fatal blow and shouts a warning to his comrades, telling them to be careful of Arthur. The fourth enemy is the strongest of the group, and at the start of the battle, Arthur has no advantage. After several rounds of close combat, he is nearly caught. Fortunately, having been the strongest king in his previous life, Arthur draws on his vast combat experience and delivers an impressive fight, ultimately killing all of his enemies. Arthur rescues the elf girl and learns through conversation that her name is Tesha. She was captured by the slave traders while playing outside. Showing his thoughtfulness, Arthur covers the corpses of the slave traders with cloth to avoid frightening the young elf. He originally planned to search for his parents, but he feels uneasy letting Tesha return home alone, especially since Tesha took the risk of being attacked to release the slave traders' mounts. Arthur is moved by the girl's kindness. After witnessing her selflessness, he decides to continue playing the role of a hero and escort her safely back home. Arthur passes on the kindness he once receives from Sylvia to Tesha. Some people always hold on to their principles of goodness and help others without expecting anything in return. Tesha often acts a little spoiled and Arthur feels helpless. He looks forward to reuniting with his family, but he spends a lot of time in an unfamiliar forest. He tries hard to suppress his impatience. Although he is only 4 years old, he treats Tesha with the patience and care of an older brother. The nighttime proves to be the most difficult. The forest is full of danger, and although Arthur is already exhausted from the day, he still needs to stay alert through the night. To make things harder, Tesha is especially chatty and tells Arthur that elves have a very poor impression of humans. Arthur doesn't take it seriously, and his carelessness nearly costs him his life. Arthur and Tesha traverse high mountains and waterfalls. Arthur, already struggling on his own, still needs to carry Tesha often as well. He reaches the brink of exhaustion, feeling a sudden sharp pain in his chest. What's worse is that the intervals between the pains become shorter, and soon, they occur every few hours. Just when Arthur is at his weakest, the slave trader's mount suddenly appears. Arthur feels a wave of despair, realizing he's completely incapable of fighting. Fortunately, the mount has no intention of attacking him. Instead, it brings food as a gesture of gratitude. At night, as Arthur eats the roasted meat, he feels conflicted. He no longer has the strength to hunt. Without this meal, they would likely starve. Arthur's concerns aren't unfounded. Tesha, finally heading to gather mushrooms, ended up picking poisonous ones. Fortunately, the toxicity isn't strong enough to be life-threatening, only causing diarrhea. Otherwise, this anime would have ended right there. Arthur never expected that he wouldn't be killed by the bandits, only to be nearly tortured to death by Tesha. Exhausted, he falls asleep, unable to resist the overwhelming fatigue. For the first time, he doesn't maintain his usual vigilance during the night. The good news is that just when Arthur's body reaches its limit, they finally find the entrance to the Elf Kingdom. Tesha is overjoyed. In contrast, Arthur shows a terrible face. As soon as he enters the Elf Kingdom, he is captured by the soldiers. The elves treat Arthur as an invader and are about to execute him on the spot. Arthur turns to Tesha for help, only to see the strange expression on her face. In an instant, a cold sweat breaks out on Arthur's brow as he recalls the betrayal he suffered in his past life. He begins to believe that Tesha might also despise humans. He fears that once he's no longer of any use, he will be abandoned, left to face a fate of being discarded. The situation becomes chaotic. Tesha continues to stop the soldiers from executing Arthur, and then her family starts to appear one by one. Arthur is stunned when he hears their introductions. Tesha's father, Alduin, and her mother, Muriel, are the king and queen of the Elf Kingdom, respectively Collectively, however, the most powerful among Tessia's family is her grandfather, Vyron. His rationality overcomes the hatred towards humans, and he stops Alduin from ordering Arthur's execution. Vyron wants to investigate what happened between Arthur and Tessia while they were together. Arthur senses that as long as the elder, Vyron, is present, he might be able to escape the fate of death. Following Tessia to cooperate with the investigation, Arthur experiences the architecture of the Elf Kingdom for the first time, as well as the hostility from the elves. The long-standing war between elves and humans has put Arthur in a very difficult situation. Additionally, Arthur has a lingering question. He doesn't understand why Tessia's expression was so strange when he was about to be executed by the soldiers. At this moment, Arthur feels another sharp pain in his chest. With many troubles weighing on him, Arthur is not only worried about his parents but also concerned about his health. At the same time, he has to prepare himself for the upcoming investigation by the elves. Fortunately, Tessia speaks for Arthur, improving his image and easing the tense atmosphere. Arthur remains polite and explains how he got separated from his family, as well as how Tessia was kidnapped by slave traders. He is careful, however, not to mention his encounter with Sylvia. The problem is that the elves treat Arthur like an ordinary child and don't believe he could have defeated the slave traders. Only Vyron maintains a neutral stance. Alduin, filled with hostility toward humans, remains suspicious of Arthur. When Arthur asks if the elves could send him back to the human kingdom, Alduin refuses. The Elf King ignores the debt his daughter owes to Arthur and has no intention of offering any help. Because of Arthur, Tessia glares at her father, with her gaze fierce, and Alduin is forced to change his attitude. The Elf Kingdom has a portal to the human kingdom, but it is only used for meetings between humans, elves, and dwarves, and it still requires 5 years to open it. Arthur is deeply worried about his parents and refuses to wait for such a long time. In response, Alduin adjusts his strategy and plans to send elf soldiers to escort Arthur back. Just then, Vyron notices that Arthur is clutching his chest. That night, Arthur's pain worsens. He goes outside to get some fresh air, hoping it will help ease the pain. While outside, Arthur unexpectedly sees Tessia with her parents, and the atmosphere is warm and comforting. Tessia notices Arthur and sees how downcast he looks. Wanting to help him feel better, she firmly rubs his face. At this moment, Arthur deeply regrets his previous misunderstanding of Tessia. This elf girl is pure-hearted and kind. She could never have had such harmful intentions. Arthur's past, filled with betrayals, has made him habitually suspicious of everyone. Just then, Vyron pretends to attack Tessia. After testing, he confirms that Arthur has awakened his magic abilities. Next, Vyron throws Arthur a sword, ready to test the boy's true strength. During the duel, Vyron is greatly surprised. Arthur has a large amount of combat skills, and combined with his talent, his fighting power is already stronger than many high-level warriors. Also, he is able to fight without accidentally injuring Tessia. At this time, Vyron is caught off guard and even gets successfully ambushed by Arthur. Vyron wants to challenge Arthur to another round, but Tessia quickly intervenes to stop the fight. Vyron actually admires Arthur and expresses a desire to become his teacher. Arthur is then told by Vyron that if he refuses, he will be killed immediately. Just then, Arthur suddenly falls unconscious. In his mind, he sees another version of himself tormented by pain. Ahead of him, a mysterious creature appears. As Arthur tries to get a clearer look at it, Tessia wakes him up. Tessia is deeply concerned about Arthur's health and brings important news. Vyron wasn't threatening Arthur into becoming his disciple, but wants Arthur to stay in the Elf Kingdom to receive treatment. At this moment, Vyron is in a heated argument with Alduin. According to the traditions of the Elf Kingdom, a human like Arthur is not allowed to remain there for long, but Vyron is unusually stubborn. Next, he plans to take Arthur to visit an old friend. On the way, Vyron expresses his gratitude to Arthur. He has noticed that Tessia smiles more when she's with Arthur than she ever did before. As the kingdom's sole heir, Tessia experienced betrayal from friends at a very young age. This makes Arthur realize that Tessia isn't as cheerful as she appears. Soon after, Arthur meets Vyron's old friend, Lilia. Like Arthur's mother, Alice, Lilia can use a special magic beyond the 4 basic elements. She then begins to guide Arthur by having him focus on a bowl of water and recall the faces of his parents. Now let's take a look at Alice and Reynolds. They are still living in pain and constantly haunted by the memory of being separated from Arthur. At that time, Reynolds relied on alcohol to numb his sorrow, while Alice cried every day. Later, they parted ways with their companions and tried to begin a new life. However, Arthur remains like a thorn deeply embedded in their hearts. Whenever they think of the past, they are overwhelmed by longing and guilt. Arthur's sudden voice makes his parents think they are hearing a call from the dead. He tells them that he must stay in the elf kingdom for treatment and hopes they can stay strong. This good news brings great joy to Reynolds and Alice, and they begin to look forward to a future reunion as a family. As Arthur's tears fall into the water, the communication comes to an end. He decides to become stronger, so he no longer causes his parents pain. Now, the only remaining issue is convincing Alduin. First, Vyron assures his son that he will personally serve as Arthur's mentor to supervise him, making sure the boy never harms the Elf Kingdom. Then Tesha emphasizes to her father that they must repay the kindness Arthur has shown them. Under pressure from both his father and daughter, Alduin finally changes his mind and accepts Arthur. If the other kingdoms were to learn of this, they would surely be shocked that humans and elves are now peacefully coexisting for the first time in a long while. Arthur holds Tesha's hand as he finally takes the time to truly appreciate the beauty of the Elf Kingdom. In his previous life, Arthur spent all his time striving to grow stronger, neglecting many things in life that hold deeper meaning. His good mood is soon disrupted by a group of elf children. Most elves still harbor hatred toward humans, and in their teachings to the younger generation, they often portray humans as savages. As a result, many elf children are upset by Tesha getting close to a human. Arthur has no intention of quietly enduring their hostility. After all, he still retains the memories of an adult from his past life, and when it comes to arguing, he's far more capable than these kids. Phyllis, the leader of the elf children, finds himself outmatched in the argument and furiously challenges Arthur to a duel. He even threatens that if Arthur refuses, it will tarnish Vyron's reputation. The elf elders don't stop Phyllis's rude behavior. In fact, they also hope to witness Arthur's defeat. However, the battle turns out to be far beyond their expectations. Arthur doesn't even use magic. He knocks Phyllis unconscious with a single ordinary punch. Their strength isn't even in the same league. After this brief incident, Arthur faces a new trial. He unexpectedly inherits the will of beasts, which is the reason for the pain in his chest. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Under Vyron's guidance, Arthur has a chance to turn this beast will into real combat power. He looks forward to this path with excitement, sensing that this life will be far more thrilling than his last. Time flies. Arthur has been training under the former elf king Vyron for 3 years. He is often paired with the elf princess Tesha for combat practice. Over the past 3 years, Tesha has grown a lot. She awakened her magic power at the age of 9 and is considered a once-in-a-century genius among the elf race. Because of this, the princess has gone from someone who once needed Arthur's protection to someone who can now fight him for dozens of rounds. After combat practice, Vyron gives lessons on magical knowledge. The main elemental magics are fire, water, wind, and earth. Humans can choose one type of magic to learn, and only a very few can control multiple elements. In the past, the beast will inside Arthur never fully awakens, and the pain in his chest hinders the improvement of his magic power. Now Vyron decides to help awaken Arthur's beast will. What happens next surprises everyone. Arthur lets out a roar similar to that of a dragon, and a powerful force blasts everyone nearby away. Arthur falls into a coma, and Vyron becomes very serious. At dusk, Arthur wakes up. When questioned by Vyron, he admits that the will inside him is not from an ordinary beast, but from Sylvia, the will of a dragon. Vyron warns Arthur to keep this a secret. The will of a dragon is extremely rare, and once exposed, it will attract dangerous attention from many people. In addition, Vyron tells Arthur that in 4 months, a youth exchange event will be held between humans, elves, and dwarves. At that time, the teleportation gate will open, and Arthur will have the chance to reunite with his family. The news surprises Arthur greatly. His training is originally planned to last 2 more years, but now he suddenly has to part ways with Vyron and Tesha. Late at night, while Arthur is unable to sleep, the dragon egg gifted by Sylvia suddenly cracks open. A dragon hatchling emerges successfully. Inspired by Sylvia's name, Arthur decides to name the little one Sylvie. Sylvie looks like a small cat, and if Arthur does not say anything, very few people can tell she is actually a dragon. Interestingly, although Sylvie cannot speak any human language, she is able to communicate basic thoughts with Arthur through their minds. At dawn, Tesha sees Sylvie and finds her incredibly cute. She keeps trying to adopt the little creature. Vyron, with his vast knowledge, immediately recognizes that Sylvie is a dragon. He once again reminds Arthur to introduce Sylvie to others as an ordinary beast. Arthur does not have much time left in the Elf Kingdom, so Vyron begins special training. For the first time, the former Elf King shows his full strength, creating overwhelming pressure for Arthur. Now that the dragon will has awakened, the pain in Arthur's chest disappears, and he starts training even harder. Time passes quickly, and the day Arthur must leave grows nearer. At this moment, a small incident happens. Arthur is once again provoked by Phyllis. Compared to 3 years ago, their strength gap is much bigger now, and Arthur easily defeats the elf boy. Phyllis acknowledges Arthur's strength, and the two clear up their misunderstanding and become friends. Arthur's other friend, Tesha, does not feel happy. Lately, she often feels down and cries alone because their farewell is approaching. Arthur notices the elf princess's unusual behavior and visits her late at night. They return to the forest where they first met 3 years ago. Arthur hopes to create a special memory for Tesha. Under the starry sky, the campfire crackles as the boy and girl talk softly. Even the night breeze carries a hint of sweetness. That night, Tesha finally falls asleep peacefully. The day of parting finally arrives. Tesha only shows up when Arthur is about to leave. She had been too afraid of the separation to come at first, but in the end, she cannot resist the strong urge to see Arthur one last time. As they share a final embrace, the teleportation gate activates. When Arthur sees his parents again, the three of them feel a bit distant at first, followed by joy. After all, it has been 3 years since they last met, and all of them have changed a lot in appearance. Arthur now also has a younger sister named Eleanor. The little girl is drawn to Sylvia and, because of that, quickly accepts Arthur as well. Arthur tells his parents about his experiences. For safety reasons, he hides the fact that he met Sylvia and only says that Sylvia is an ordinary beast. Reynolds also tells his son about his current situation. He now works at a high-end auction house, training security personnel. They are currently staying at the home of the auction house's owner, Vincent. Magic power is divided into 5 levels, and each level has 3 stages. Reynolds is now at level 3, stage 1, which makes him a mid-level warrior among humans. When Reynolds hears that Arthur is already at level 2, stage 3, he becomes extremely excited. No one feels jealous of their own son. Reynolds only wants to have a sparring match with Arthur now. Just then, Vincent returns with his wife Tabitha and daughter Lilia. His relationship with Reynolds is less like that of a boss and employee and more like that of close friends. Sylvie, with her naturally adorable charm, wins Lilia's affection, just like she did with Tesha and Eleanor. Vincent is shocked when he learns about Arthur's magic level. Most of the genius students at the Magic Academy barely reach stage 1 of level 2 in their early teens. What Vincent doesn't know is that Arthur's training was slow at first because his dragon hadn't fully awakened. If Arthur had been able to train at full capacity from the beginning, he would have surpassed Reynolds long ago. At the beginning of the training match, both father and son exchange tentative attacks, each afraid of hurting the other. After confirming that their strength is close, Reynolds is the first to get serious. Fire element magic begins to surge around him. In this world, every warrior or mage who awakens their magic power can learn to control one type of elemental magic. Massive waves of water, scorching flames of fire, raging hurricanes of wind, and devastating landslides of earth. Elemental magic of the same level is usually more than 3 times stronger than non-elemental magic. Arthur falls into a disadvantage, frequently dodging Reynolds' fire attacks. Everyone watching thinks Arthur has not yet learned elemental magic. At this moment, a golden light radiates from Arthur's body. The boy brings another surprise. He has not only learned elemental magic but also mastered both water and fire elements at the same time, making him a very rare multi-element magic user. Interestingly, Vincent is even more excited than Reynolds. Everyone wants to have more powerful friends, and based on the talent Arthur has shown, this boy is certain to become a top-tier powerhouse in the future. Especially when Vincent hears that Arthur awakened his magic power at the age of 3. He immediately decides to send Arthur to a magic academy for further studies. Tabitha quickly adds that she and her husband will cover all of Arthur's tuition fees in full. This investment is highly forward-looking. If Vincent's auction house has a top-tier warrior on its side, even members of the royal family will have to treat them with respect in the future. Vincent has professional connections with the headmaster of the Magic Academy and promises he can secure Arthur's admission. Arthur, however, says he is too tired from today's events and heads back to his room to rest. By giving no direct response, he politely declines the proposal to enroll in the Magic Academy. When Arthur leaves the room alone, he receives an invitation from Lilia, and the two of them head to the kitchen together. Although this young lady acts reserved in front of her parents, she is actually very cheerful in private. Arthur hears from a maid that Vincent and Tabitha hope their daughter will become a mage, but Lilia has never awakened any magical talent. Whenever she feels pressured, she sneaks into the kitchen to eat a lot. Arthur realizes that his arrival as a genius might also be a source of pressure for Lilia. Just as Arthur is thinking about how to help Lilia, the sudden arrival of a group of old friends shifts his attention. Reynolds' adventurer teammates rush over to see the boy as soon as they hear Arthur is back. Arthur feels the warmth of these older companions, especially Jasmine, who treats him like her little brother and looks after him with great care. The welcome Arthur receives exceeds his expectations. Tabitha takes him to get a new haircut, while Lilia picks out new clothes for him. Together, they visit Vincent's auction house. During the tour, Arthur is mocked by a group of students from the Magic Academy. Lilia tells him that these students act even more arrogant than members of the royal family because of their privileged status. Soon, they meet again. Lilia hopes to buy a monster core to help herself awaken. At the shop, she runs into the same students from the Magic Academy. These boys are used to bullying ordinary people. Arthur does not want to compromise anymore, and just as he is about to fight, Tabitha finally arrives. The noble lady reveals her identity. The students know that Vincent has donated a lot of money to the Magic Academy, so they do not dare to cause trouble and choose to leave for now. Later, when Vincent hears about the conflict, he comforts Arthur and tells him not to worry. The incident will not affect his admission. Suddenly, Lilia questions Vincent, asking if her spot at the academy will be replaced by Arthur. Ignoring her parents' explanations, she runs off to the kitchen, feeling deeply upset. Arthur decides to help Lilia cheer up, knowing that what she cares about most is losing her parents' love. At dawn, Arthur brings the adults unexpected news. He has sent Lilia to the Elf Kingdom for training, hoping it will help her awaken her powers sooner and meet her parents' expectations. Vincent is devastated. The only thing he ever wanted for his daughter was happiness, but now she has left her hometown to endure hardship in pursuit of strength. After Vincent speaks from his heart, Lilia suddenly appears. This is actually part of Arthur's plan. He wants to help the father and daughter overcome their misunderstandings and let Lilia truly understand the love her parents have for her. After that, Arthur begins his next plan. Drawing on the training insights he gained in the Elf Kingdom, he guides Lilia through her own training. He finally helps the young lady break through her bottleneck and awaken her magic. That night, Lilia goes to the kitchen again, but this time, not to escape in frustration, but to celebrate with joy. After a brief period of happiness, a new crisis is slowly approaching Arthur. Vincent hosted the auction house's 10th anniversary celebration, and even the royal family attended in grand attire. Arthur was so focused on the auction items that he didn't notice Sylvia had been missing for a long time. At this moment, Sylvia was targeted by the king's personal mage. Arthur tried to communicate amicably to take Sylvia away, but the mage wouldn't have it. The respect the mage received by being close to the king made him extremely arrogant. He even threatened to kill Arthur's family. This enraged Arthur. His family was the most important thing to him in this life. In an instant, a terrifying killing intent enveloped the entire auction house, and by the time Arthur calmed down, he had already caused immense panic. Arthur thought the killing intent he displayed would be enough to make the mage give up Sylvie, but what happened next was beyond his expectation. The mage first manipulated the king, trying to forcibly buy Sylvie. After being rejected, he then teamed up with the soldiers to launch an attack. Arthur no longer held back. He first knocked down the soldiers, then unleashed his potential, casting a time-stop spell. Arthur learned this from Sylvia, and the mage's leg was stomped on by Arthur. Arthur fell unconscious after severely overdrawing his stamina. When he woke up, he was back in his bedroom. This whole commotion ended peacefully, with the king firing the soldiers and the mage, blaming them for attacking without authorization. The king did this for another reason: to show goodwill to Arthur. The king wasn't aware that Arthur used time-stop magic, but Arthur's talent in instantly knocking down soldiers was something the king already admired. Reynolds initially didn't accept the king's reconciliation. This father was even willing to go to war with the king for his son. Arthur was more rational. He clearly knew he wasn't strong enough to start a rebellion. This incident made Arthur feel a greater sense of urgency. He needs to become strong quickly, strong enough that no one in this world can harm his family. Arthur decides to further his abilities by joining the Magic Academy, where he meets the headmistress. Don't underestimate this old woman. She's easily among the top 5 strongest individuals Arthur has encountered. The headmistress had heard about Arthur's talent from Vincent, and she's here to test the boy's potential. Arthur tries attacking the headmistress with elemental magic, but none of his attacks land any effective damage. Her incredible strength is completely at odds with her appearance. She stands her ground without dodging, yet effortlessly nullifies every attack. In fact, when Arthur unleashes his full power, the headmistress simply knocks him back. What's more, the headmistress doesn't wield mainstream elemental magic. Instead, she specializes in sound-based magic. Information about this type of specialized mage is incredibly scarce, and no one knows her weaknesses. Despite her immense power, the headmistress doesn't underestimate Arthur. The boy's potential is outstanding, and she accepts Arthur's proposal for delayed admission. Arthur wants to travel the continent first and join the Magic Academy 3 years later, once he reaches the normal enrollment age. Initially, Alice doesn't agree. She doesn't want to be separated from her son so soon after their reunion. This world is full of dangers, ferocious beasts and treacherous humans, and Arthur is so young that Alice is incredibly worried. Reynolds is criticized by Alice for supporting Arthur, However, the father has good intentions. Staying hidden at home for safety would actually cause Arthur to lose his ability to confront danger. Reynolds suggests finding an adult to travel with Arthur, which would allow Arthur to explore the continent with added safety. After some discussion, it's finally decided that Jasmine will accompany Arthur. She's skilled in reconnaissance and stealth, which will greatly help protect Arthur. Before they set off, Arthur finds a special sword in Vincent's treasury that perfectly suits him. This sword came from a mysterious old man, and its quality remains unidentified to this day. Arthur doesn't really care. He's satisfied as long as the weapon feels right. And just like that, Arthur begins a new journey. Arthur needed a new identity to travel the continent. Introduced by Jasmine, he used a fake name to take the Adventurers Guild test. Arthur saw many peers his age whose strength was close to adult powerhouses. To avoid unnecessary attention, Arthur held back during the test, ultimately only achieving a B-rank adventurer status. After this, Arthur and Jasmine embarked on their first solo mission. They encountered a mana-beast attacking humans. This creature, a hybrid of an ox and a wild boar, devoured a human in an instant. Arthur unleashed the hidden power he held back during the test, striking multiple times in 1 second, finally defeating this formidable foe. At dusk, Arthur and Jasmine chatted, living and fighting together. Their relationship grew closer. Arthur learned that Jasmine came from a prominent family. Because she lacked fire magic talent, this older sister couldn't inherit her family's magic, and was constantly ridiculed as useless since childhood. She became an adventurer to escape her home. Arthur was furious. Before transmigrating, he was also called useless, and eventually built a kingdom with his own fists. Arthur overlooked one thing: his anger wasn't just due to shared experiences, but also because he had unconsciously fallen for Jasmine. At this moment, Tessa was secretly watching Arthur and Jasmine through a crystal ball. She was highly alert and decided to win the boy back in the next season story. Congratulations! You finished another anime recap on my channel. Feel free to rate it in the comments section. I once saw a classic line: "A happy childhood can heal a lifetime of misfortune, while an unhappy childhood requires a lifetime to heal." Arthur grew up in tragic circumstances in his previous life, leading him to become increasingly suspicious and sensitive, even making a peaceful sleep a luxury. It wasn't until he transmigrated and met his current parents that he finally became cheerful and kind. Few people are born evil. Perhaps all they lack is a happy childhood. Alright, that's it for this video. See you in the next one.